Welcome to the LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Matt Dumont, an LSAT teacher and tutor at the LSAT Demon, and a 2L at the University of Maryland. With me is Pushkar Chobal, who is an LSAT teacher at the LSAT Demon and a corporate strategy manager at a major retailer. How you doing, Pushkar?
Doing great, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing great, my man. We got 2 emails today, and they just speak to your expertise. So let's dive in. These 2 emails are both from Anonymous. So the first one says, "Hey guys, besides starting salary, scholarships, and location, how would you decide where to attend law school? I spoke with a professor at my undergraduate school and he ripped me apart. I pointed to making my decision based on scholarship offers and the average starting salary. He rightfully pointed out that I may be making my decision based on starting salary averages and the difference between $5K and $10K worth of scholarships. Starting salary averages do not inform one of the likelihood of achieving it, and a $5,000 to $10,000 difference is minimal in the grand scheme of life. Okay, where else should I look? I'm interested in big law real estate firms." So, my initial impression is just like, hey, your undergraduate professor is like, great. I'm sure they have the best of intentions, but do they know what they're talking about, right? And so, Pushkar, what are your thoughts about that?
I think it really comes down to your individual priorities. I tried to optimize for, location, and our entire credo here at Thinking Outside of the LSAT Demon is don't pay for law school, right? So try to go for free as much as you can. Select the school where you have like the maximum amount of scholarships and make that overall financial headache a little bit easier on yourself.
Yeah, I mean, so here's my question. Is your professor paying for your law school, right? If he's not paying for your law school, how much of an opinion does he have, right? And so if your real focus is not paying, then let that be the focus. My number one focus was not paying for law school. And so I took one of the 13 full ride offers that I got. And that's how I made my decision. I had those lined up and I said, okay, great. Now, where do I want to practice? And so that really informed me coming back to the East Coast, going to Maryland. It was where I wanted to practice and full ride. And so I think your professor has the great intentions, but are they paying for your law school? Do they actually know what they're talking about? Great. Yeah. They point out some important things. And that starting salary stuff, can you speak to that a bit, Pushkar? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? If you are looking for starting salary for big law, and I think we'll get to this later in the episode, but big law salaries are kind of in lockstep. There's a standard scale called the Cravath scale, named after the biggest big law firm, Cravath. So starting salary may not be the best indication just because for big law, they're going to be the same across the board. So I would not look at that. Instead, if you do want to look for a school that will optimize your chances for getting into big law, fortunately or unfortunately, ranking does matter. So I would try to go to the school where you have the most money, but and the good location, but also the highest rank that you can get into, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So something like, hey, if you have a full ride at, for instance, like Boston University versus Fordham, I think those are probably pretty similarly ranked, and so the ranking might not matter, but where do you want to practice? And then if you compare Fordham in New York City versus St. John's, if you have full rides at both, it's kind of like a no-brainer to go to Fordham in that instance.
Exactly.
Great. Okay, so this is let's dispense with that. Let's move on to I think the meat of the reason that we're here today. Which was the second discussion, which is what data points can we use to compare financial outcomes for top performers at various law schools? For example, what is the likelihood you land a big law starting salary and the most you could possibly make if you place within the top 10% of your class at a top 20 school? A lot going on there. Pushkar, take it away, my man. You're our big law specialist.
Oh, I want to break this question down a little bit, just into more manageable chunks. I think first let's hit on compensation, right? And I alluded to this a little bit earlier about the Cravath scale, According to that scale, first-year associates going into big law will make roughly $215K just base salary. Crazy numbers, right? And I think the top top 20 or 30 firms will follow this scale. So as far as the question of starting salary and what you can expect to make going to Big Law, that's going to be your frame of reference if you're targeting one of those kind of more elite firms. Now, going into like the probability of getting into Big Law, right? As far as determining that chance, a proxy stat that you could use is the ratio of students who get into Big Law from that university. And one way you could do this is look at the ABA report and look at the ratio of students who go to law schools or law firms or federal clerkships overall, and from that number, which are going to law firms of over 500 plus people. That's going to be your kind of proxy indicator for how many students from that school are going into Big Law.
And that's the ABA job outcomes, right? Not the 509 report.
Thank you for clarifying. Yep, that's the ABA job outcomes, which you can find on the ABA employment outcomes website.
Yeah, absolutely. So what Pushkar is pointing to is like this data is publicly available. Again, it's consumer protection related, just like the 509 is. And so just like you use a 509 to determine like the scholarship outcomes for applying to a particular school and like the medians and 75ths for the LSAT and GPA and that kind of thing, you can also look up this employment outcome data that tracks bar passage rate and clerkships and firm life versus public sector. And it even breaks it down of like solo practitioner or working for a firm that's like 50 or less, 100 or less, 500 or more, etc. And so that's a great resource on the ABA employment outcomes data.
Precisely. And by way of example, right, if you look at Columbia Law, they sent roughly 365 students to law school, to law firms in general. And of that, roughly 315 graduates go to law firms with more than 500 people. So like that's kind of an 85% rate there. And that's kind of my proxy, right, of what is your chance of getting into Big Law. So at a school like Columbia, the chances are, roughly, it's pretty good. Now talking about schools that maybe are lower in the top 20, right? I think that's where it gets a little more interesting. If you look at the same ratio, roughly 50 to 60 students get into Big Law at schools like WashU, USC, Boston. And just really important to point out that 50 to 60%, that doesn't mean you have a 50 or 60% chance of getting in, right? If you barely squeak into one of those schools, you're probably going to be not in the top 10 or top 20% of your class, and it's going to make getting to Big Law very difficult.
Right. And so to piggyback on that, Nathan and Ben keep talking about Dean Z on the Thinking LSAT podcast and on the Demon Daily about how your LSAT and GPA are a strong indicator of what your first year grades are going to be. Well, first year grades determine what you're going to do for your first summer. First summer is pretty indicative of what you might do for your second summer. Second summer is summer associateship towards your future job. And so those kind of things, they're not determinative. You can break the mold. However, the mold exists for a reason. It is pretty accurate as far as outcomes go. And so as Pushkar is saying, hey, if you squeak in, you're paying full freight at WashU, you do not have a 50% chance of going into Big Law.
Correct. And you're incurring a debt at that point, just tuition debt, right, of around $200K at that point. So you're taking on $200K of debt, and your chances of Big Law, if you squeak in, are not looking that great. That's not a great financial investment that I would recommend.
Now, what do you think about comparing that to, say, going for free at a school that's ranked 40th instead? What do you think if you sort of juxtapose that versus squeaking into number 19?
Right. So if you get in for free, the implication is that you are the best of the best of the students who got admitted in that class. And what that means is that you're probably going to be in the top 10% of your graduating class, and that's going to put you in a really, really good position to go after those prestigious Big Law kind of positions. Because big law firms will only be hiring the top, 10 or 15% of the classes. So not only are you going for free at that point, but you are putting yourself in a very, very good position and setting yourself up for a Big Law internship or job.
Yeah. And I think just to sort of speak from my own experience, I'm going to a school that's in like the high 40s. I think right now it's ranked 50 at Maryland. And the really big law, they're doing resume drops for the top 5%. So they're not
Oh
even going
wow.
to interview you. Now, the sort of like standard big laws that have satellite offices in Baltimore, that kind of stuff, they're only looking at the top 10%. And so if you're outside of that at a lower ranked school, chances are not as great. You do have a better chance if you go to a higher ranked school, but it's not just like a 50% chance for sure.
Right.
Okay. Well, what do you think? Any other sort of like data points or things that we can point to help out Anonymous?
Yeah, well, I would go back to the ABA employment outcomes. That's where you can figure out that proxy statistic of how many students are getting into big law firms at the schools that you're considering. Also on that sheet will be the tuition information, so you can kind of price out how much debt you may take on at one of these schools.
Makes sense. Well, I just want to sort of throw out one data point I know about Big Law, and that is signing bonuses, and a very particular signing bonus, which I think is eye-opening. So some big law firms really headhunt clerks, former clerks, especially from the Supreme Court. And there aren't too many schools that drop people in on Supreme Court clerkships. Yale is certainly one of the best. Harvard does that some. Stanford does that some. But Yale literally has a clinic on it.
That's right.
You can be in the Supreme Court clerkship clinic while you're in school, which is crazy. And the reason why that matters is because if you come out and you end up clerking, you're one of like the 20 people that clerk for the Supreme Court justice, a headhunter is going to try to offer you almost $500,000 as a signing bonus at a big law firm. So if you really, really want to do it, I mean, that's the golden ticket, right? Clerk for the Supreme Court, I think is...
To reiterate, that signing bonus alone is
yeah,
the 500K.
Signing bonus alone. On top
Jeez.
of whatever your salary is. It's
Right.
I think it's $450,000 just for a signing bonus. And that's from an article on Above the Law, which I just think is banana pants.
Gosh. That made me think of one more resource, actually. If you take a look at the AmLaw 100 or Vault 100, that's going to give you a list of like the big law firms that are going to pay that cravat scale that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. And so not all big law, I think what Pushkar is talking about is like not all big law is necessarily equal. There are certainly the big of the big laws that pay that. Maybe some more regional places or some smaller but still big-ish law.
Right.
They're going to be more like 190, 180. Then you can get down to more really regional places that are going to be paying like 140. And then if you're doing public interest, of course, you're going to be making like $40,000 a year. So
Right.
good luck with your loans on that. Oh, man. Well, I think this person has some information to take back to the bank. Any final thoughts, Pushkar?
I would just say good luck. Don't pay for law school.
Yeah, if you don't pay for law school, you don't have to worry about what your starting salary is.
That's
You
right.
can just buy a house instead, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. I want to thank so much for Anonymous for writing in. If you'd like to be on the show, email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask us a question or share some LSAT or law school admission news. Thanks for listening.